Picture a captivating world where impenetrable dense jungles conceal majestic ancient temples in their shadows, like guardians of long-gone eras. Stone pyramids, like giant stepped colossi, proudly rise above the endless green ocean of tropical foliage, and intricate hieroglyphs, artfully carved on ancient stelae, carefully preserve precious memories of times long past. This is the world of the legendary Mayan civilization, one of the most mysterious, amazing, and incredible cultures that has ever existed on planet Earth. They lived in the very heart of Central America, in the territory where the lands from southern Mexico and Guatemala to Honduras and El Salvador now stretch, creating a unique cultural space imbued with secrets and grandeur. Their fascinating history began more than 3,000 years ago, around 1000 BCE, when the first tribes founded their modest settlements among the wild and impassable jungles, defying the elements. Over time, these modest settlements grew and developed, gradually transforming into vast centers of advanced knowledge, sophisticated art, and spiritual wisdom. Unlike classical empires, where all power was concentrated in the hands of one all-powerful ruler, the Maya never knew a single centralized state. Their world was a complex and intricate network of independent city-states, each desperately striving for its own greatness, political influence, and economic prosperity. This amazing Mayan world was revealed to modern humanity thanks to the dedicated work of archaeologists painstakingly studying the ruins of ancient cities, thanks to Spanish chronicles telling of the last dramatic days of the independent Mayan city-states, and of course, thanks to the Maya themselves, who left behind invaluable manuscripts filled with the magic of ancient myths, deep religious beliefs, and prophetic predictions. Their sacred books, such as the famous Popol Vuh, which tells of the creation of the world and man, and the mysterious books of Chilambalam, full of prophecies and historical chronicles, reveal to us not only religious beliefs, but also the ancient history of this amazing people. But even in our time, Mayan culture continues to be shrouded in an impenetrable veil of secrets and mysteries that stir the imagination. Why did they suddenly abandon their magnificent cities, leaving them to the mercy of fate and the absorption of the jungles? How, without metal tools at their disposal, were they able to erect these grandiose temples and complex architectural complexes, striking the imagination with their precision and monumentality? How did they manage to create complex calendars that with amazing accuracy predicted solar and lunar eclipses, demonstrating the deepest knowledge of astronomy and mathematics? These and many other questions continue to stir the minds of modern researchers, scientists, and simply lovers of the secrets and mysteries of ancient civilizations. Welcome to the fascinating world of the ancient Mayan civilization, full of incredible discoveries, enchanting legends, and still unsolved mysteries. The history of the Mayan civilization spans a period of more than 3,000 years, and scientists conventionally divide it into three main periods: early, classic, and post-classic, each of which is characterized by its own unique features and achievements. These boundaries are, of course, not absolutely strict, but they help us better understand how powerful city-states gradually emerged from small, disparate settlements, how science, art, and religious ideas reached unprecedented heights, and then, unfortunately, experienced a period of crisis and decline. Today, we will turn our gaze to the very beginning of this amazing story, to the era when the Maya were just beginning their journey, forming a unique culture that would later amaze the whole world with its incredible achievements. The first modest Mayan settlements appear approximately 2,000 years BCE, which corresponds to the second millennium BCE. These were small villages scattered among dense and impassable jungles, where life was full of difficulties and dangers. Unlike nomadic tribes, who constantly moved in search of food, the inhabitants of these settlements already led a settled lifestyle, engaged in agriculture, growing basic crops such as maize, which we know as corn, beans, squash, hot chili peppers, and cacao, from the fruits of which they made a valuable drink used for ritual purposes. Archaeological finds convincingly demonstrate that even in this early period, they had fairly complex irrigation systems that allowed them to maintain relatively stable yields even during periods of drought, which was vital for survival. Maize, or corn, played a central and indispensable role in the life of the ancient Maya, not only as a basic food source, but also as an extremely important religious symbol associated with their mythology and cosmogony. According to ancient myths, it was from maize dough that the gods created the first people, endowing them with reason, soul, and the ability to learn. However, Mayan culture did not arise in complete isolation from other peoples and cultures, but developed in interaction with neighboring civilizations, adopting and adapting their achievements. In the same historical period, at about the same time, another influential civilization, known as the Olmecs, flourished on the coast of the Gulf of Mexico, and its cultural and technological influence on the early Maya was truly enormous and undeniable. The Olmecs, in essence, became pioneers in Mesoamerica, the first to develop a complex writing system, create a calendar to measure time, and form complex religious cults that had a profound impact on all subsequent cultures in the region. Archaeological research conducted over many years irrefutably proves that the Maya adopted and significantly developed many of these crucial Olmec achievements, adapting them to their own needs and cultural characteristics. In particular, the counting system, based on the vigesimal system and the use of the concept of the number zero, which was revolutionary for that time, appeared under the direct influence of the Olmecs, who were the first to use this system. They also transmitted to the Maya ideas about complex calendar cycles, allowing them to accurately track time, and various ritual practices, including the widespread cult of the feathered serpent, a powerful deity that in later periods of Mayan history, would become Kukulkan, one of the most revered gods. However, the Maya did not simply blindly copy the knowledge and technology of their predecessors, but actively improved them, creating the most accurate calendar system in the ancient world, allowing them to predict astronomical events with incredible accuracy, and one of the most complex and developed writing systems used to record history, religious texts, and scientific knowledge. Around 1000 BCE, which corresponds to the first millennium BCE, the Maya begin to actively build the first real cities, turning small settlements into large centers of political, economic, and cultural life. One of the oldest archaeological sites dating back to this early period is Nakbe, located in modern-day Guatemala, which is a prime example of this process. It is here that archaeologists have discovered the remains of ancient stone platforms and the first pyramidal structures, which clearly demonstrates the significant development of architecture and the emergence of a complex social structure necessary to organize large-scale construction projects. During this same historical period, an influential class of priests appears, who played an important role in Mayan society, not only conducting religious rituals and ceremonies, but also engaging in astronomical observations necessary to create an accurate calendar, complex mathematical calculations, and managing communities, ensuring order and stability. Already then, they began to use the first hieroglyphic records, foreshadowing the flowering of writing that would occur in the classic period of the Mayan civilization, when hieroglyphic writing would reach its highest development. Over time, these settlements began to grow rapidly, turning into large cities, and along with this grew an acute need for a strong and centralized power capable of managing the growing population and ensuring its safety. Chiefs, who were previously only leaders of communities, gradually turned into full-fledged rulers with unlimited power, which was passed down from father to son or other relative. Thus begins the formation of powerful dynasties that would rule the Mayan city-states for centuries to come, determining their political, economic, and cultural fate. The power of such rulers rested not only on military force and the ability to defend their possessions from enemies, but also on religious influence, since the rulers were considered chosen by the gods and mediators between the world of people and the divine world. During the same period, the first alliances between various city-states begin to form, aimed at protecting against common enemies or obtaining economic benefits, and along with them, the first conflicts inevitably arise, often leading to bloody wars. Archaeological finds testify to traces of fierce battles, the remains of fortifications around settlements, and the appearance of military symbolism, which indicates the growing militarization of Mayan society. But, despite all the difficulties and conflicts, the early period of Mayan history is primarily a time of formation, a time of accumulating knowledge, adapting borrowed traditions, and persistently searching for its own unique path of development. So, we are smoothly entering the classic period of the history of the Mayan civilization, which is often called its Golden Age, a time when ancient settlements turned into majestic city-states, huge temples soared upward as if defying the heavens, and science and art reached incredible heights, striking the imagination with their beauty and perfection. This was the Golden Age of the Maya, an era of powerful rulers whose names were forever carved in stone, an era of great achievements in many areas of human activity. But at the same time, it was also a time of incessant wars, treacherous intrigues, and a fierce struggle for power, when city-states rose, expanded their influence, subjugated neighboring territories, and clashed in bloody conflicts that determined the political map of the region. Each great Mayan city, like a jewel in the crown of a civilization, possessed its own unique character, its own distinct history, and its own special role in the complex political landscape of that time. They differed from one another in architectural style, political ambitions, economic strategies, and even approaches to warfare, which made each Mayan city-state unique and unparalleled in its own way. Tikal, located in the heart of the impenetrable jungles of modern-day Guatemala, is rightfully considered a legend among all Mayan cities, a symbol of might, military valor, and political influence. This powerful city, also known as the City of the Jaguar, played the role of an important center of political sway and one of the main military bastions of the classic Mayan period. It majestically towered over the surrounding terrain, like a proud guardian. Its massive pyramids, constructed with incredible skill, soared high into the sky, and its ambitious rulers for many years laid claim to hegemony and control over the entire Mayan civilization, striving to unite the disparate city-states under their rule. The main temple, rising among the ruins of Tikal, like a witness of long-gone eras, was called the Temple of the Great Jaguar, and it was dedicated to this sacred animal revered by the Maya. The jaguar, possessing strength and agility, was a symbol of power, night, and the mysterious afterlife. In the complex mythology of the Maya, it was closely associated with the god of the underworld, the lord of death and darkness, and was considered the patron of brave warriors and mighty kings. The Temple of the Great Jaguar, among other things, served as the burial place of Hasauchan Kawil I, one of the most powerful rulers of Tikal, who sought to strengthen his influence and expand his possessions through successful military conquests, subjugating neighboring city-states. The serpent in Mayan culture was a symbol of wisdom, cunning, diplomacy, and power over life and death, which reflected Calakmul's political strategy. Unlike Tikal, which built its empire primarily on wars and military force, Calakmul preferred to operate behind the scenes, being a center of political intrigue, coalitions, and conspiracies. It skillfully created extensive networks of alliances with other city-states, wove complex plots against its enemies, and slowly but surely weakened its main rival, undermining its economic and military power. For 2 long centuries, Calakmul steadily gathered a coalition of cities, striving to surround Tikal from all sides and completely destroy its military might. Several times it managed to win victories over Tikal, weakening its military power and undermining its political influence. But in the 7th century of our era, Tikal, gathering all its strength, inflicted a crushing defeat on Calakmul and regained its primacy in the region. This prolonged war, known as the Tikal-Calakmul War, became one of the longest and most destructive in the history of the Mayan civilization. It led to the collapse of entire dynasties, to the destruction of dozens of cities, and a significant weakening of the entire Mayan civilization, undermining its economic, political, and social stability. While Tikal and Calakmul waged fierce wars for dominance in the region, Copan and Palenque, 2 other major Mayan city-states, became important centers of science, art, architecture, and engineering, contributing to the development of the civilization. In Copan, a unique writing system was created, distinguished by its complexity and beauty, and the rulers of this city sought to leave their mark on history, immortalizing their deeds in stone records, skillfully carved on the steps of temples and palaces, so that their names would be remembered by future generations. Palenque, in turn, turned into a real gem of architecture, striking with its refinement and sophistication. Here was the famous Temple of Inscriptions, inside which was buried the great Pakal, one of the most famous and revered Mayan rulers, whose sarcophagus and mask made of jade, discovered by archaeologists in the 20th century, became some of the most valuable and significant archaeological finds ever made on the territory of the Mayan civilization. War for the ancient Maya was something much deeper and more meaningful than just a trivial struggle for territory or political power. It was a complex ritual, a sacred act, an act of establishing a special connection between the world of people and the world of the gods, a unique opportunity for warriors to demonstrate their courage, valor, and devotion, and for rulers to strengthen their power and legitimacy in the eyes of their subjects. The warrior, in essence, acted as an intermediary between this material world and Xibalba, the mysterious underworld of the dead, the abode of gods and spirits. From early childhood, boys in Mayan society were prepared to become warriors, instilling in them the values of courage, discipline, and self-sacrifice. They were constantly told that the true strength of a real man lies in his ability to fight, to show courage in battle, to take prisoners who were later sacrificed to the gods, and to protect his community from enemies. The one who succeeded in battles showed incredible valor and brought victory to his people, received universal recognition, fame, respect from his fellow tribesmen, a high position in society, and the opportunity to join the ranks of the elite close to the ruler. The more prisoners a warrior brought after a successful battle, the higher his social status became and the more privileges he received. The Maya did not just recruit random people into the army. Their fighters underwent strict and thorough selection, and only those who were ready to devote their lives to hunting for prisoners, fearlessly fight for their ruler, and, if necessary, give their lives in the name of the gods, could become warriors. Professional soldiers who dedicated themselves to military affairs were called halach uinik, and they formed the backbone of the Mayan army. These warriors underwent rigorous and intensive training, honing their weapons skills and combat tactics. They knew how to accurately shoot a bow, hitting targets at a great distance, skillfully throw spears, wield various types of blades, and remain unnoticed in the dense jungles, using their knowledge of the terrain for surprise attacks and ambushes. In turn, the Ahawob represented the elite of the nobility, hereditary warriors who came from noble families, who commanded detachments of warriors and fought in the front ranks, demonstrating their courage and leadership qualities. They wore the best armor, made of durable materials and decorated with symbols of status, possessed personal detachments of warriors, loyal to them to the death, and could challenge an enemy warrior in a one-on-one duel, demonstrating their skill and courage. The supreme commander of the army was called a nacom, and he played a key role in Mayan military operations. He was an experienced strategist and tactician who led the entire army, making important decisions and determining the course of the battle. He developed complex battle plans, carefully selected targets for conquest, taking into account the strategic importance of the territories, and was fully responsible for success or failure in the war. And finally, the Ahau Kak, the ruler himself, often personally led his troops into battle, inspiring warriors with his example of courage and determination. He, in essence, was the embodiment of the god of war on earth, and his presence on the battlefield was believed to bring victory and good fortune. But among all these warriors, a special place in the Mayan army was occupied by elite units, known for their incredible courage, skill, and connection with otherworldly forces. They stood out among ordinary soldiers for their unusual clothing, decorations, and special attitude towards them, and were considered messengers of the gods and earthly incarnations of ancient forces. Jaguar warriors, one of the most famous elite Mayan warriors, wore the skins of this predator, which symbolized their connection with the animal world, and their movements were fast, silent, and graceful, like the jaguar itself. They attacked suddenly, like shadows, tore through the enemy's ranks, sowing panic and chaos, kidnapped commanders to demoralize the enemy, and quickly disappeared into the night, leaving behind only horror and confusion. Their method of combat was similar to hunting in the wild: stealth, patience, a sudden and devastating attack. Their faces were covered in complex war paint, black stripes stood out on their skin, giving them a sinister appearance, and their eyes glowed in the moonlight, instilling fear in the hearts of enemies. Their steps were silent, and their attacks were lightning fast, leaving the enemy no chance of defense. They didn't just fight, they hunted, stalking their prey and delivering a deadly blow at the most unexpected moment. Before pouncing on their victim, they let out a wild howl, growled, and imitated the cry of a jaguar, instilling terror in the hearts of enemies. That bestial roar, piercing the hearts of their enemies, robbed them of their will to resist, paralyzing them with fear and despair. When they struck, their blows were precise, swift, and deadly, like the claws of a predator. Their weapon, the maquahuitl, a wooden sword embedded with razor-sharp obsidian blades, tore through flesh like the talons of a real jaguar, inflicting terrible pain and suffering. They did not always kill outright, often leaving their victims alive to be sacrificed to the gods. They knocked weapons from the hands of their foes, broke bones, inflicting grievous injuries, yet left their captives breathing, for their blood was to be spilled atop the pyramid as an offering to the deities. The night was their faithful ally, granting them an advantage over their enemies. In battle, they vanished and reappeared like shadows, lurking in the dense jungles, encircling their foes and instilling terror. They knew when to bide their time, patiently awaiting the opportune moment to strike, and when to unleash a devastating blow, leaving the enemy no chance of survival. If the jaguar warriors reigned in the darkness, striking terror into the hearts of their enemies, the serpent warriors controlled the very strategy of war, using their intellect, cunning, and knowledge to achieve victory. The serpent warriors did not favor direct assaults, preferring stealth and treachery. Their primary mission was to infiltrate enemy cities to sow chaos, panic, and discord, undermining morale and preparing the ground for the main army's future invasion. They appeared among ordinary citizens, disguised as peasants or merchants, and began spreading false rumors of betrayal, bribed guards at the city gates to ensure unobstructed passage for their troops, and opened the gates of the enemy city when the main army was already approaching. They preferred not to engage in open combat if there was a chance to win the battle without bloodshed, using trickery and deceit to achieve their goals. The serpent warriors wore clothing made from snakeskin, adorned themselves with golden amulets in the shape of serpents, symbolizing their connection to this animal, and their bodies were covered with intricate tattoos depicting coiled vipers, marking their affiliation with this elite unit. The patron of the serpent warriors was Kukulkan himself, the feathered serpent, god of wisdom, knowledge, and destructive power, who was the patron of warriors and rulers. The serpent warrior's weapon of choice was spears with poison-tipped points, capable of killing an enemy quickly and silently. They poisoned water sources to weaken their opponents, stealthily crept up on enemy soldiers, and delivered swift, precise, and deadly blows to the throat or liver, using their skills in stealth and knowledge of anatomy. As the darkness of night dissipated, giving way to the first rays of the sun, the eagle warriors entered the fray, embodying might, strength, and fury. They were like thunder, a storm, a raging sun, sweeping away everything in their path. They did not hide, did not wait for a convenient moment to attack, did not ponder the consequences of their actions. They crushed the enemy with their power, fearlessness, and incredible speed. Their armor was exquisitely adorned with eagle feathers, symbolizing their connection to this proud bird, and their faces were painted with gold and red patterns, symbolizing the heat of the sun and the blood of their enemies, giving them a terrifying appearance. They raised their arms aloft, mimicking the flight of the eagle, and their battle cries were heard for miles, striking fear into the hearts of their enemies. The eagle warriors always attacked first, breaking through enemy lines with their powerful assaults and wielding various weapons such as throwing darts, spears, and large swords, delivering devastating blows. They struck from above, like swooping eagles, shattering the enemy's resistance with the force of a single blow. And if the battle dragged on, if the enemy showed resilience and continued to resist, the jaguar warriors and serpent warriors came to the rescue, completing the enemy's rout. Then no one could escape their inevitable doom. The Maya did not engage in mass battles on open plains. Their battlefields were the dense jungles, high mountains, and cities surrounded by impregnable walls, where they could use their skills in stealth and knowledge of the terrain. They did not launch frontal assaults, but vanished and reappeared where they were least expected, launching surprise attacks and sowing panic in the enemy's ranks. Seizing water sources was their favorite strategy, allowing them to quickly break the enemy's resistance. A city could hold out for years if it had food supplies, but without water, it was doomed to fall within days. They blocked water sources, poisoned rivers to deprive the enemy of access to clean water, and cut off supply routes, denying the city the opportunity to receive provisions. They also actively used fear as a weapon to break the enemy's spirit and demoralize them. Before the battle began, they emitted loud animal cries, reminiscent of the roar of jaguars and the hiss of snakes, displayed the skulls of sacrificed enemies to instill terror in the hearts of their opponents, and staged false attacks to force the enemy to expend energy and break their morale. Battles for the Maya were a kind of spectacle, carefully planned and played out according to a predetermined script, the aim of which was to break the enemy before they had a chance to understand what was happening. But what happened to those who survived these brutal battles and were taken prisoner? They became victims, an offering to the gods, symbolizing victory and the pacification of divine forces. The prisoners were led through the streets of the cities, displayed to the people as trophies, and at the end of this sad journey, priests awaited them, ready to perform the ritual of sacrifice. On the summits of majestic pyramids, before the eyes of all the people, their hearts were cut from their chests, still beating, and their blood flowed down the stone steps, nourishing the gods and ensuring the prosperity of their people. But prisoners were not always sacrificed immediately. They could be used as slaves for some time, forced to work in the fields or build new temples. But if a prisoner was important, for example, the ruler of a captured city or a great warrior, he might be spared, but humiliated and stripped of his former status. His head was shaved as a sign of shame. He was forced to wear the clothes of a prisoner, symbolizing his dependence, and to serve his new master, demonstrating his obedience. In the 9th century AD, the city-states of the Maya began to gradually fade away, approaching the twilight of their great civilization. It was not a sudden collapse, not a catastrophic event that occurred overnight, but a slow, agonizing, and protracted process of decline, as people abandoned once mighty centers of civilization one by one, leaving the streets deserted, the marketplaces abandoned, and the majestic temples empty, as if devoid of souls. But this sad ending was only the beginning of a new era, a new chapter in the history of the Mayan people. The southern lands, once prosperous and powerful, sank into the darkness of oblivion. But in the north of Yucatan, under the scorching sun of the tropics, a new world was being born, full of hope and opportunity. Cities that had competed for centuries in the struggle for power and influence suddenly found themselves in equally dire straits, facing common problems and difficulties. First, the trade caravans that delivered goods and resources to the cities suddenly disappeared. Then the bustling markets fell silent, losing their customers and sellers. The luxurious homes of the nobility, which once shone with gold and jade, symbolizing wealth and power, were covered with a thick layer of dust, evidence of desolation and decay. People abandoned their homes and native lands, abandoning everything: fertile fields that yielded abundant harvests, cozy homes built with love and care, and even the sacred altars of their ancestors, revered for generations. The dense jungle, like a ruthless conqueror, gradually engulfed the majestic temples, erasing the traces of civilization, and the priests, who until recently proudly invoked the gods, now themselves fled in panic, saving their lives. What happened? What caused this tragic decline? Why did a civilization capable of building incredible cities, understanding the secrets of the stars, and creating complex writing systems and calendars suddenly lose its power and find itself on the verge of extinction? Some historians and researchers believe that the cause was a great drought that struck these lands. The rains, which for centuries had generously nourished these lands, ensuring life and prosperity, suddenly ceased, as if by the will of an evil fate, and the reservoirs, which served as a source of fresh water, dried up, leaving people without a vital resource. Without water, it was impossible to grow corn, which formed the basis of their diet, or to maintain large cities with thousands of inhabitants. Others believed that the cities destroyed themselves, being caught in a whirlwind of bloody and ruthless wars. The great rulers, seeking to maintain power in their hands, waged endless wars with each other, destroying everything they had built themselves and weakening their cities. But whatever the true cause, one thing is certain: the southern lands, once shining with grandeur and prosperity, gradually became deserted, turning into a lifeless wasteland. But this did not mean that the history of the Mayan people had come to an end, that their culture and traditions had been lost forever. They did not disappear without a trace. They simply moved to other regions, preserving their identity and culture. Yucatan, a vast peninsula located in present-day Mexico, covered with rocky plains and arid forests, became a new home for those who fled the destroyed cities, escaping famine and war. There were no dense jungles and full-flowing rivers here, but there were cenotes, unique natural formations, natural wells filled with clean, fresh water, which became the main source of life for the settlers. And it was here, in Yucatan, that new cities rose, new powerful centers of Mayan civilization, such as Chichen Itza, Uxmal, and Mayapan, inheriting the traditions and culture of their predecessors. As a traveler approached Chichen Itza, one of the most famous and majestic Mayan cities in Yucatan, an unusual and captivating world opened before him. The city was not like the southern Mayan centers, abandoned by their inhabitants. There was something foreign in its architecture and culture, something new, brought in from the outside. Grand temples soared into the sky, much like those in Tikal, but their architecture was distinct, blending elements of the classic Maya style with emerging trends. The stone halls were wider, more massive, and adorned with exquisite reliefs and sculptures. New symbols, unseen before in Maya culture, appeared among the decorations, hinting at the influence of other peoples. In the city's main square stood the majestic pyramid of Kukulkan, a stepped temple dedicated to the feathered serpent, which each spring and autumn transformed into a mysterious and captivating spectacle. As the sun set at a precise angle, the shadow of a colossal serpent would appear on the pyramid's steps, as if the god himself were descending to earth to bless his people. Locals passed down a legend that warriors, unlike any they had seen before, had once arrived from the north, beyond the horizon. Their skin was swarthy, their clothes and customs differed from those of the local people, and their language was incomprehensible. They wore armor decorated with images of snakes and feathers. Their weapons were different from those of the Maya, and their gods spoke a different tongue. These were the Toltecs, a people from lands north of the Yucatan, where the legendary Aztec Empire would later rise. They brought with them a new philosophy, religion, and more effective methods of warfare, profoundly influencing the culture and history of the Yucatan Maya. The Toltecs also brought their supreme god, Kukulkan, also known as the feathered serpent, representing civilization, order, and accumulated knowledge, yet simultaneously a deity of war and power, demanding not only obedience and reverence but also bloody sacrifices. In the courtyards of Chichen Itza, where peaceful sacred ball games had once been played, the heads of prisoners sacrificed to the gods now rolled across the blood-stained stones as priests performed brutal rituals. People were thrown into sacred cenotes, sinkholes, in the belief that their souls would travel to the mysterious underworld of the gods, bypassing earthly life. On ritual altars, the still beating hearts of captured warriors were cut from their bodies and raised high to the sky, as if offering a sacred tribute to the gods. Yucatan, unlike centralized empires, was not a unified state, but a collection of independent city-states, each fiercely vying for dominance in the region, seeking to subjugate neighboring territories and establish control over trade routes. As Chichen Itza reached its peak, it gradually declined, but Uxmal, located nearby, was rising, becoming a new center of power and culture. Uxmal, in turn, eventually vanished from the political map, but Mayapan, with its strong army, rose up, aiming to unite all of Yucatan under its rule. Yet none of these cities managed to maintain power over the entire land for long. The Maya, who had spent centuries building their worlds, creating magnificent cities, and developing science and art, were now tearing them apart with their own hands, plunging the region into chaos and destruction. Their cities were ravaged by warlike neighbors, their power was undermined by treacherous conspiracies, their priests prayed tirelessly to the gods, but received no answer to their prayers, sensing an impending doom. But beyond the horizon, a new and previously unseen threat was slowly but surely approaching, foreshadowing radical changes. From across the vast ocean, from lands no one had ever heard of, sailed enormous ships carrying men in gleaming armor, bearing fiery weapons, previously unknown diseases, and new religious beliefs. The arrival of the Spanish was to change the Maya world forever, putting an end to their independence and distinctiveness. Through the humid air of the Yucatan, over the green jungles and ancient temples, came the first alarming sound, foretelling impending doom. Heavy sails billowed in the gusts of wind, and ships, unlike anything the experienced Maya seafarers had ever seen, dropped anchor off the coast of Yucatan. On that fateful day, when the Spanish first set foot on Maya soil, the last and most tragic chapter in their long and glorious history began. In 1511, a Spanish ship en route from Panama to Hispaniola was caught in a fierce storm that erupted in the Caribbean Sea. The wind, whistling like the voice of an ancient god, tore at the sails, and massive waves crashed violently against the wooden hull of the ship until finally the vessel broke apart on treacherous reefs near the coast of Yucatan. About 30 men, desperately clinging to pieces of wreckage, tried to reach the shore, hoping to escape certain death. They had no idea where they were, what awaited them in this unfamiliar land, or who its inhabitants were. When the first Spanish survivors, exhausted and weakened, made it ashore, they were immediately surrounded by armed Maya warriors who looked quite hostile. Obsidian, macuahuitl swords, drawn bows, and spears with sharp bone tips were all pointed at the strangers, demonstrating their unwillingness to welcome uninvited guests to their land. The Maya were not expecting visitors, and certainly did not trust them, fearing that they would bring with them misery and destruction. The surviving Spanish, who had found themselves in their territory, were taken prisoner, treated as enemies. Some were killed immediately, unwilling to waste time feeding them. Others were soon sacrificed to the gods in cruel rituals. Their hearts were torn from their chests at the top of majestic pyramids, their blood flowed down the stone steps, and their skulls adorned ritual altars, becoming part of a sinister ceremony. But 2 Spanish men miraculously managed to survive this hell. One of the survivors was named Gonzalo Guerrero. He was not only an experienced sailor, but also a courageous warrior, well aware of what it meant to fight for his life and how to survive in the most extreme conditions. He quickly realized that if he wanted to stay alive and avoid the sad fate of his comrades, he had to become one of these people, learn their language, understand their culture, and earn their respect. He learned their language, learned their customs, adopted their traditions, earned their respect, and became one of the Maya, accepted into their society. Gonzalo Guerrero became a Maya warrior, married the daughter of a local chieftain, becoming related to the ruling dynasty, and had children who became part of this nation. When, years later, the Spanish reappeared on the shores of Yucatan, seeking to conquer this land, he remained on the side of the Maya, defending his new home. He stood against them with an obsidian sword in his hand, with Maya tattoos on his face symbolizing his belonging to this people, with his body painted in war patterns, ready to give his life for the freedom of the Maya. Gonzalo Guerrero, having embraced Maya culture and become part of that people, died as a Maya, valiantly defending his new homeland from foreign invaders. The other survivor, Jerónimo de Aguilar, chose a completely different path, guided by different convictions. He remained in slavery, but retained his faith, culture, and loyalty to the Spanish crown, hoping for liberation. And when, years later, Hernán Cortés, the renowned Spanish conquistador, landed on the shores of Yucatan, Aguilar, fluent in Maya languages, gladly joined him, becoming a valuable translator and mediator between the Spanish and the various peoples of Yucatan, helping Cortés establish connections and forge alliances. This division, this difficult choice between the Maya and Spain, between defending one's culture and submitting to foreign conquerors, became a sad harbinger of what was soon to happen to the entire Maya civilization. In 1517, the Spanish captain Francisco Hernández de Córdoba led a fleet towards the shores of Yucatan with a specific purpose. This time their arrival was not an accident caused by a shipwreck, but a deliberate military expedition equipped to explore new lands, search for gold, and enslave local peoples who could be converted to Christianity and used as labor. The Spanish landed on the coast of Yucatan and moved inland. They were greeted by Maya rulers, priests, warriors, and ordinary people gathered to express their welcome and learn the purpose of the strangers' arrival. They brought the strangers gifts, demonstrating their peaceful intentions, skillfully woven cotton fabrics, fragrant cocoa, and jade ornaments symbolizing wealth and power. They did not yet realize what a tragic fate awaited them and what these uninvited guests would bring. The Spanish looked with interest at the offered treasures, felt the soft fabrics, tasted the exotic cocoa, but there was no genuine delight in their eyes. They were looking for gold, the coveted metal that promised wealth and power. And the Maya had almost no gold. Soon, the peaceful encounter that began with good intentions unexpectedly turned into a bloody massacre, unleashing a war between two different worlds. The Spanish attacked first, provoking conflict and demonstrating their aggression. Their swords, made of durable steel, easily cut through Maya shields and armor made of wood and stone. Their muskets, spewing fire and thunder, frightened the locals, who had never seen such weapons and did not understand how they worked. Their horses, covered in sturdy armor, galloped forward, sweeping away Maya warriors and tearing through their ranks, instilling terror and panic. But the Maya did not flee in fear, but bravely fought, defending their land and freedom. They set ambushes in the dense jungles, crept up at night to the Spanish camps, set fire to their dwellings, and used their knowledge of the terrain for successful attacks. They knew no fear of death, for they believed that if they died in battle, they would go to paradise, where the gods awaited them. But the forces were unequal. The Spanish, with their advanced weapons and military experience, outnumbered the Maya in military strength. The Spanish left Yucatan, having suffered significant losses, but promised to return to conquer these lands and subjugate the local people. And they returned a few years later, with an even larger army, with even more fire and cruelty, ready for a full-scale war. But the Spanish had a weapon that was even more deadly and dangerous than muskets and steel swords, a weapon that not even the most powerful Maya rulers knew about. The Spanish brought with them diseases like smallpox, measles, and typhus, illnesses the people of the New World had never encountered, and for which they had no immunity. These diseases did not kill the Spanish as quickly, because Europeans, over centuries, had developed some resistance through living in unsanitary conditions and enduring constant epidemics. But among the Maya, who had never faced these diseases, there was no defense. People died in hundreds, then thousands, and then in entire cities, unable to resist the spread of deadly infections. Priests, in desperation, cried out to the gods, begging for help, but received no answer to their prayers, feeling powerless before the impending catastrophe. They tried offering more sacrifices, tearing out more hearts, hoping to appease the angry deities, but the gods remained silent, turning their backs on their people. Cities turned into vast cemeteries, where there was no one left to bury the dead, and the survivors lived in constant fear of death. The Spanish did not even have to fight. Disease was already doing their dirty work for them, undermining the Mayan resistance. While the Spanish had already trampled the lands of the Aztecs and Incas beneath their boots, and new colonies were flourishing on the bones of ancient civilizations, the Maya continued to resist, unwilling to surrender without a fight. Their story did not end overnight, and their civilization did not collapse with the fall of a single city. They fought to the last, defending their independence and freedom, and their final cities remained free, like islands of light amidst the darkness of conquest. The Spanish called them stubborn and cruel barbarians, unwilling to submit to the will of civilized people. But in reality, the Maya simply refused to give up, preferring death to slavery. They did not have a single king, like the Aztecs, whose authority extended to all city-states. They had no capital, whose fall would mean the end of all resistance. Their civilization, unlike centralized empires, was woven from many independent city-states, and each one fought for itself, for its land, freedom, and faith in the ancient gods. The Spanish conquest of the Yucatan lasted more than 1.5 centuries, representing a prolonged and fierce struggle for control of the territory. One by one, the Spanish crushed the Mayan cities, destroyed their magnificent temples, and killed the priests who preserved ancient knowledge. But somewhere in the impenetrable jungles, a new military leader would always rise, ready to lead the resistance and continue the fight. Somewhere again, priests whispered prayers to Kukulkan, calling on him for help. Somewhere, altars were erected for sacrifices to regain the favor of the gods and restore past glory. But despite all the efforts and sacrifices, eventually all the Mayan cities fell to the Spanish conquistadors. The longest to resist the Spanish onslaught was Tayasal, the last stronghold of Mayan freedom, a city that stood on an island in the middle of the picturesque Lake Petén Itzá. Its powerful and impregnable walls were reflected in the waters of the lake, creating the illusion that the city was floating between two worlds, the world of ancient gods and the world of cruel conquerors. Tayasal remained free when all other Mayan lands had been captured by the Spanish, becoming a symbol of hope and resistance for all who believed in the ancient traditions and gods. Here, sacrifices were still made to the old gods. The memory of ancestors was honored, and the voices of the spirits living in the impenetrable jungles were remembered. The Spanish could not simply take Tayasal by storm due to its advantageous geographical location. The island, surrounded on all sides by water, was a natural fortress, making it extremely difficult to capture. The leader of Tayasal, Can Ek, understood that the Spanish were strong, cunning, and cruel, and that they would stop at nothing to capture his city. But he also knew that if the city fell, his people would face either slavery or an agonizing death, and that he had to do everything possible to protect his land and freedom. Initially, he tried to negotiate with the Spanish, hoping he could make peace, preserve his power and faith in the ancient gods, and avoid bloodshed and destruction. He hoped it was possible to negotiate, find a compromise, and avoid the complete annihilation of his people. But he was wrong, naively believing that the Spanish would be willing to peacefully resolve the conflict. In 1697, the Spanish, led by Martín de Urzúa, approached Lake Petén Itzá with cannons, soldiers, and fire capable of burning entire cities, demonstrating their determination to capture Tayasal at any cost. They began building boats to cross the waters of the lake and reach the island, and when their fleet was ready, they descended upon the last city of the free Maya, beginning a brutal assault. Tayasal fell in fire and blood, despite the desperate resistance of its defenders. The Spanish razed the city to the ground, leaving no stone unturned. They destroyed the temples, burned all the books, killed those who refused to submit to their authority, and desecrated sacred places. With the fall of Tayasal, the era of independent Mayan civilization ended, ushering in a time of colonial domination and oblivion. But the Spanish not only destroyed their cities, but also destroyed the very memory of the Maya, erasing their history and culture from the minds of future generations. The Maya, among other things, were keepers of knowledge, possessing unique scientific achievements. Their scholars knew numbers, stars, and the movements of planets, predicting future events. They calculated eclipses with incredible accuracy, created complex calendars, and understood the concept of zero long before Europeans, demonstrating a high level of development in mathematics and astronomy. They wrote books in which they kept the history of their peoples, their myths, religious beliefs, and scientific knowledge, passing them down from generation to generation. But when the Spanish came, these books became something frightening and threatening to them, a symbol of paganism and heresy that had to be destroyed. The Spanish bishop Diego de Landa, known for his cruelty and fanaticism, declared that the Mayan books were devilish creations, that they contained false knowledge displeasing to the Christian God, and that they had to be destroyed to eradicate paganism. He ordered all Mayan codices, writings, and records that could be found to be collected and burned. A huge bonfire was lit in the central square of the Spanish settlement, in which priceless treasures of ancient civilization perished. Scrolls, books, wooden tablets with engraved symbols, created by the labor of many generations, were thrown into the fire. The flames mercilessly devoured centuries of knowledge, turning them into ashes. The Maya, gathered in the square, stood and watched as their history died, as their world disappeared in flames, as black clouds of smoke carried away the words of ancestors, prayers, scientific knowledge, and their entire lives. Later, Diego de Landa wrote in his report, "We found a multitude of books, but as they contained nothing but superstition and devilish fabrications, we burned them, considering it necessary to eradicate paganism and spread the Christian faith. And this undoubtedly grieved the indigenous people to the depths of their souls, inflicting an irreparable wound on their culture and self-awareness. But they were not just grieved. They were killed from within, deprived of their history, traditions, and connection to the past, feeling the loss of their identity. Out of the thousands of books that once existed in the Mayan civilization, only 4 have survived to this day, serving as valuable testimonies to their culture and knowledge. But even amidst the ashes of burned books, memory did not disappear completely. The descendants of priests, who preserved ancient knowledge and traditions, deprived of the opportunity to write their books in their native language, began to record them in Spanish, using Latin letters, but in their native tongue, to preserve their culture for future generations. This is how the Popol Vuh appeared, a book of myths and legends, telling stories about the creation of the world, ancient gods and heroes, and the books of Chilambalam, containing predictions, prophecies, and fragments of history, recorded secretly in fear of the Spanish, to preserve the heritage of ancestors. They could not completely replace the burned books, but they preserved the voice of the ancient people, passing it on to the next generations. When the Spanish burned the Mayan cities, crushed their majestic temples, and declared that their gods had triumphed over the Mayan gods, the Maya themselves did not cease to believe in their gods, believing that they were still alive and watching them. They knew that true gods do not die or disappear, and that they are still present in the light of the sun, in the sound of rain, and in the breath of the wind, surrounding them everywhere. The Maya understood that their entire life was closely connected with the deities who ruled their destinies. Every day, every harvest gathered, every victory, and every defeat was the result of the will of the gods. If the rains were late and the fields remained dry, it meant that Chak, the god of rain, was angry with them. If the year was rich and the harvest was plentiful, it meant that Kukulkan, the feathered serpent, was pleased with them and blessing them. If someone died, they faced a long and dangerous journey to Xibalba, the mysterious underworld of the gods of death, where the souls of the dead went. In their faith, there was no clear division between good and evil in the way we understand it. The gods could be merciful to their worshippers, but they could also be cruel, punishing them for disobedience and violation of traditions. They demanded submission, adherence to ancient traditions, and sacrifices to maintain harmony in the world and ensure the prosperity of their people. Without this, the world could disappear, as the great Mayan cities disappeared, abandoned by people and swallowed up by the jungles. Among all the gods, Kukulkan, also known as Quetzalcoatl, was one of the greatest and most revered deities in the Mayan pantheon. His image combined the strength of the serpent, symbolizing earthly wisdom and power, and the lightness of the bird, representing heavenly spirituality and freedom, combining 2 worlds, the earthly and the heavenly. Ancient legends say that Kukulkan came from the east, bringing with him the light of knowledge and civilization, and taught people writing, sciences, and crafts, imparting his knowledge to them. He gave them laws that were to govern their lives, taught them to build cities, create complex rituals that were to maintain order in the world and ensure its harmony. He was depicted as a huge serpent covered in bright feathers, or in the form of a man, but with the head of a serpent, or decorated with feathers, symbolizing his divine origin. In the art of the Maya, he always appeared powerful and serene, radiating wisdom and authority like a true ruler of the world. Kukulkan was a symbol of civilization, order, and wisdom, a patron of sciences and arts. It was thanks to Kukulkan that the Maya considered themselves a chosen people, capable of understanding the laws of time and space as well as predicting the future. But one day he departed, leaving his people behind, but promising to return in the future. Legends say that he left the lands of the Maya, sailing beyond the horizon to the east, and promising to one day return to bring prosperity and peace once more. When the Spanish first landed on the shores of the Yucatan, some Maya who knew the ancient legends recalled this myth. Was not Hernán Cortés, the Spanish conquistador, the return of Kukulkan spoken of in the ancient prophecies? Had he not come to reclaim what he had once left behind, to regain his power over these lands and to re-establish order? But Cortés did not bring them the light of knowledge and civilization. He brought only destruction, oppression, and death. Without rain in these arid lands, there would be no life, and the people suffered from thirst and hunger. Fields and rivers dried up, livestock died, and people perished from starvation. Therefore, Chac, the rain god, was one of the most important and revered gods of the Maya, to whom they prayed, asking for rain and fertility. He was depicted as a mighty spirit of water, capable of summoning thunderstorms, filling wells with fresh water, and granting abundant harvests, or, conversely, sending a devastating drought, depriving people of the possibility of survival. Chac could be kind and generous when people honored him, worshipped him, and offered him gifts, and cruel when he was forgotten. His power was disregarded, and they ceased to venerate him. To win his favor, the Maya held elaborate ceremonies, throwing various offerings such as precious stones, gold, and incense into sacred cenotes, and in the driest of times, even humans, sacrificing them. Priests told their congregations that Chac lived in the heavens, from where he controlled the flows of water, sending rains and regulating the level of rivers and lakes. Sometimes he was depicted as a god with a serpent coiled in his hand, and lightning burst from the serpent's mouth, symbolizing his power over the elements. If it did not rain for a long time and the earth dried up, people knew that Chac was angry with them and demanded sacrifices. Then they sacrificed innocent children, young maidens or brave warriors to the rain god, throwing them into deep cenotes filled with cold water, hoping to appease the angry god and restore his favor. They believed that the souls of these victims could implore Chac to pour rain on their parched lands, saving them from starvation. And when the first rumble of thunder echoed in the distance, heralding the approach of a long-awaited thunderstorm, when the first drop of rain fell on the parched earth, people knew that Chac had heard their prayers and had taken pity on them. Before the sun and moon appeared to illuminate the world, before the first humans breathed air, and the world took its present form, there existed Itzamna, mysterious and mighty. He was the first being, the primary force that gave rise to all things, the prime cause of everything that exists in the world. He was not a god in the usual sense of the word, but an eternal beginning, present even before the emergence of time and space, before the appearance of other gods. The Maya believed that Itzamna wove this world like a skilled weaver, intertwining sky and earth, creating harmony between the different elements and bringing order to chaos. But he was not cruel or demanding, like many other gods who thirsted for blood and worship. He did not crave blood and did not demand constant sacrifices from people. Instead, he bestowed knowledge upon them, protected the wise, patronized priests, rulers, and all those who sought knowledge and harmony. Ancient legends say that Itzamna created the world by separating the sky and the earth, just as an experienced craftsman cuts fabric into two parts. He raised the celestial vault, establishing 13 levels of heavens where gods, spirits, and other supernatural beings lived. Then he created the earth, giving it 9 levels leading to the underworld, Xibalba, the realm of the dead. Between these two worlds, he left a space intended for people, animals and plants, creating a habitat for all living things. But the earth was initially bare, empty, and motionless, devoid of life and color. Then Itzamna created the sun to animate this world with its warmth and light, and the moon to illuminate the nights, providing rest and peace. After that, he created the first people, endowing them with reason, feelings, and a soul. Unlike the immortal gods, people were weak and mortal, subject to disease and suffering. To help them survive in this harsh world, he gave them fire so that they could keep warm on cold nights, gave them corn so that they could feed themselves and not die of hunger, and gave them language so that they could communicate with each other, sharing their knowledge and experience. But then he withdrew into the shadows, allowing the world to develop according to its own laws. His mission was completed, the world existed, time had begun, and he could calmly observe what was happening. Priests believed that Itzamna had not disappeared completely from this world, but continued to watch over people from the heavens, invisibly present everywhere. He does not interfere in their affairs as actively as other gods do, but if the balance in the world is disturbed and chaos ensues, he will reappear to restore order and return harmony. Unlike Chaak, who demanded bloody sacrifices for rain, or Kukulkan, who punished those who forgot his laws, Itzamna did not need sacrifices because he was a god of wisdom, knowledge, and harmony. He was offered incense, flowers, and prayers, glorifying his greatness and thanking him for the creation of the world, as well as various items made by human hands. If Itzamna created and gave life, then Arpuch met all living things at the moment when life faded and death arrived. He did not appear among people while they were full of strength and health, but waited for them in the shadows, knowing that sooner or later everyone would find themselves before him on the threshold of death. Arpuch, the lord of the realm of the dead, looked exactly as befits the ruler of a dark underworld, instilling terror in the hearts of mortals. His face was a gruesome skull with a sinister grin. Empty eye sockets yawned with darkness, and cold hands seemed to take away the warmth of life itself, dooming everything to destruction. His neck was adorned with necklaces made from the eye sockets of the dead, and his mantle was woven from shadows, surrounding him with a gloomy aura. He never came to people unexpectedly, suddenly cutting short their lives. Owls, mice, and vultures, harbingers of trouble, brought news of his imminent approach, warning people of impending death. If at night somewhere a guttural and ominous cry of an owl was heard, it meant that Arpuch had already gone out for someone's soul, and death was inevitable. But people did not simply passively await his inevitable appearance. They tried to appease the formidable god of death, slow his steps, and postpone their demise. Arpuch was not a god to whom one could pray, hoping for mercy, as he was implacable and merciless. But he could be satiated, so that he would not take too much life, protecting those who were not yet ready to go to the afterlife. To maintain the balance between life and death, priests sacrificed brave warriors, captives taken in battles, and sometimes even members of the nobility to Arpuch, demonstrating their loyalty and trying to buy themselves off from death. They believed that if they did not give Arpuch several lives voluntarily, he would take more than necessary himself, dooming many people to death. But Arpuch was not always fed with the blood of others. Sometimes priests, demonstrating their devotion and willingness to self-sacrifice, would cut themselves on the body, giving the god of death only a few drops of their own blood to avert his wrath and protect their people from misfortune. They knew that they could not stop Arpuch, since death is inevitable for every living creature, but they tried to ensure that he came for them as late as possible, prolonging their lives and the lives of their fellow tribesmen. Itzamna gives life, creates, and fills the world with breath, bestowing it upon all living things. Arpuch, on the contrary, takes it away, but at the same time checks whether the soul is worthy of being reborn in this world, having passed through all the trials and proving its strength. The Maya knew perfectly well that this cycle of life and death never breaks, and that everything in the world exists thanks to the constant alternation of creation and destruction, life and death. They worshipped Itzamna, the creator of all things, but respected Apuk, the lord of death, realizing his inevitable presence in their lives. They sang of life, admiring its beauty and diversity, but were not afraid of its end, understanding that death is an integral part of existence. They did not consider death to be a complete disappearance and oblivion, but understood that it was just a new path that everyone must go through in order to continue their life cycle. When a person died, his body remained on the earth, eventually turning to dust, but his soul began its long and difficult journey down into the depths of Xibalba, the mysterious underworld hidden from the sunlight. The Maya knew that death was not the end of everything, but only the beginning of a new trial that every soul must pass. Xibalba awaited everyone who left this world, and no one could escape its gloomy realm. It was an underworld, cold and dark, full of traps, dangers and suffering, where the souls of the dead were subjected to various trials. Once there, the soul did not find peace and tranquility, but had to go through many tests to prove that it was worthy of either eternal rest in paradise or rebirth in a new body in order to continue its life journey. But not all souls reach the end of this path, overcoming all obstacles and withstanding all trials. Many of them were lost in the labyrinths of Xibalba, fell into treacherous traps set by the gods of death, and remained in the gloomy realm of the dead forever, unable to leave it. The Maya did not believe in hell in the sense that other peoples imagined it, as a place of eternal torment and suffering. For them, Xibalba was less a hell and more a realm where the weakness of the soul was punished, and strength, courage and resilience were rewarded, determining its ultimate fate. It was a vast subterranean world, filled with somber halls, rivers of blood and poison, and tangled labyrinths where souls wandered for eternity, seeking a way out. The entrance to Xibalba lay deep within the earth, beyond hidden caves and bottomless sinkholes, where people cast offerings to the gods, hoping to appease them. In Xibalba, the sun never shone, trees never grew, and birds never sang. Only cold stone halls, rivers filled with the lamentations of the dead, and bridges that could collapse at any moment, dooming souls to eternal torment. The god of death, Apuk, ruled here, along with his vast retinue of demons and evil spirits. They did not simply await the dead, but tested their souls, tormenting them, probing their courage and resilience, and forcing them to prove their strength to determine their final destiny. As soon as a soul left the body, it did not immediately enter Xibalba, but instead passed through a complex trial, a sort of judgment that decided its fate. The Maya believed that the death gods in Xibalba first closely examined a person's life, assessing their deeds, their relationship with the gods and other people. They considered what sacrifices they had made to the gods, whether they had been brave in battle, whether they had honored their ancestors, and whether they had followed the laws and traditions of their people in order to determine whether they were worthy of continuing their existence. But this judgment was not simply a formal assessment of their actions, but rather a complex process that involved passing through many trials. The soul of the deceased had to pass through 9 levels of the underworld, where each trial presented a serious threat, capable of breaking its will and stripping it of hope for salvation, or conversely, giving it an opportunity to prove its strength, courage, and resilience in order to move forward along the perilous path. The journey through the underworld was incredibly difficult and fraught with danger. The gods of Xibalba did not let anyone go easily, but subjected the souls of the dead to cruel trials, testing their endurance. The Maya told their children that a traveler descending into the world of the dead faced many deadly obstacles capable of destroying their soul. One of the first obstacles on the path to salvation was a river of blood, which one had to cross without drowning or succumbing to terror. If a soul was too weak, it remained in this place forever, doomed to eternal torment. Further on, halls of trials awaited, where new dangers and difficulties awaited. In the hall of ice, a deadly chill enveloped the traveller, from which they could only escape through strength of spirit, without succumbing to despair. In the hall of fire, flames raged, searing anyone who tried to pass through, testing their endurance and stamina. In the hall of jaguars, the soul encountered bloodthirsty predators that pounced from the utter darkness, testing its courage and ability to defend itself. In the hall of bats, thousands of these creatures swirled around the victim, ready to tear it to shreds, instilling terror and despair. Each trial tested willpower, resilience of spirit, the ability not to succumb to fear and despair, and the ability to overcome difficulties and fight for one's life. Those who passed all the tests proved their strength, courage, and wisdom, earning a reward. They could leave the gloomy Xibalba and either be reborn in a new body, given the opportunity to start a new life, or go to the celestial realms, where great spirits and gods dwelled, earning eternal peace and bliss. Those who could not withstand the trials, retreated before the difficulties, or gave up, were taken by the gods of death, dooming them to eternal suffering. Their souls remained in the dark depths of the underworld, where they wandered for eternity, finding no escape and having no hope of salvation. But the Maya believed that even the weakest and most lost spirits did not disappear forever, but continued to exist in another form. They became shadows that slip through the jungle at night, voices that whisper in the wind, signs that can be seen in the reflection of water, continuing to remind us of themselves. But was it possible to avoid Xibalba and not go through these terrible trials? Yes, but not everyone succeeded in this, but only a select few who had earned the special grace of the gods. The most honorable death for the Maya was to die in battle, defending their people, to die in childbirth, giving new life, or to be sacrificed to the gods, giving their lives in the name of the community's prosperity. Such souls, marked by the gods, did not go to Xibalba, but went straight to paradise. They were picked up by the sun gods, so that they could live among the stars, among the ancestors, those who had earned eternal peace and bliss in the heavenly kingdom. But an ordinary person could not avoid their path, could not avoid meeting Apuk and the horrors of Xibalba. They only had to pass all the tests, prove their strength, and earn the right to escape from the realm of the dead. For the Maya, death was a road, a difficult and dangerous journey that every soul had to make. They did not fear it, but prepared for it, trying to live a worthy life, knowing that after death, the most difficult test began. Xibalba awaited everyone, but not everyone could escape from it, and only the most worthy were granted eternal rest. The Mayan world rested on a fragile balance between the forces of life and death, between the light of the sun and the shadows of the underworld, between creation and destruction. They believed that the universe had already been destroyed several times in the past, and if the gods were not supported by offering sacrifices and offering prayers, it could disappear again, plunging the world into chaos and darkness. To prevent this from happening, people had to give the gods the most valuable things they had: blood, life, and strength. This was an exchange established since ancient times, when the gods created the world and endowed people with life. The gods gave life to man, and man had to periodically give part of himself so that the universe would continue to exist, maintaining its harmony and order. According to the Maya, these sacrifices were not senseless cruelty, but a necessary condition for maintaining the universe and ensuring the prosperity of their people. Each ritual sacrifice and each drop of shed blood had its own specific purpose and deep meaning in the Mayan worldview. And sometimes, in order for the gods to accept the gift and show their favor, it was not necessary to die in battle or on the sacrificial altar, but it was enough to simply win a game, demonstrating one's strength and skill. The Maya believed that blood was not just a physiological fluid, but a powerful energy and nourishing force that the gods needed to maintain the universe and ensure the well-being of people. They believed that in the beginning, when the world was first created, the gods themselves shed their blood to create the universe, which meant that people had to respond in kind, giving part of their life force so that the world would continue to exist and develop. But not all blood was equally valuable to the gods. The more important and significant the person sacrificed, the more energy was contained in their sacrifice, and the more benefit it brought to the gods. Kings, priests, and noble warriors, who possessed special power, were best suited for sacrifices. Their blood was considered pure, filled with strength, blessing, and knowledge, and therefore most valuable to the gods. Captured warriors, captured in battles, were ideal sacrifices for the gods of war, symbolizing the victory of one city over another and strengthening the military power of the community. Children and young girls, symbolizing purity and innocence, were given as gifts to Chak, the god of rain, to appease him and summon the long-awaited downpour, saving the people from drought and famine. Their sacrifice was considered particularly strong and could invoke the favor of the gods. But the gods did not always demand death, and it was not always necessary to make human sacrifices. Sometimes priests, demonstrating their devotion to the gods and willingness to self-sacrifice, gave part of their strength themselves, piercing their tongue, ears, or other limbs, and shedding their blood, which was then burned, sending smoke as a gift to the gods, symbolizing their submission and reverence. For the Maya, each sacrifice was a complex ritual, permeated with symbolism and having a deep meaning in their religious worldview. Let's take a closer look at some of the most famous and widespread types of sacrifices practiced in the Mayan civilization. One of the most famous sacrifices, and often depicted in frescoes, was the removal of the heart. This ritual was performed on the tops of majestic pyramids so that the gods could see the sacrifice and accept their gift. The person was placed on a sacrificial stone, a special stone slab with a curve that raised the chest, making it easier for the priest to access the heart. The priest, dressed in ritual clothing and armed with a sharp obsidian knife, made a quick and precise movement to open the victim's chest and removed the still pulsating heart, raising it high to the sky as an offering to the gods. The blood that flowed profusely from the wound poured down the steps of the pyramid, sprinkling the ground and symbolizing the life force given to the gods. And the victim's body was either thrown down from the pyramid or used for ritual eating, if the victim was a captured warrior, paying tribute to their courage. Beheading was another common method of sacrifice and was used for gifts to the gods of war and the lords of the underworld, symbolizing victory and strength. The victim, destined for beheading, had their hands tied, placed on a special stone platform, and then the priest cut off their head with one precise blow with a sharp obsidian axe. The victim's head was often displayed on a platform for public viewing, and the blood flowed into special channels leading to the altar where other rituals were performed. Drowning in sacred sinkholes, which were an important part of Mayan religious life, was also a common practice. It was believed that sinkholes were gates to the underworld, connecting the world of people with the world of gods, and if a victim was thrown into their depths, they would become a messenger between gods and people, conveying their prayers and requests. The victims were most often young people adorned with jade and gold, symbolizing their purity and value. They were thrown into the water, and then people waited, observing what would happen. If the victim drowned immediately, it was considered a good sign, meaning that the gods had accepted the offering. However, if the victim remained on the surface of the water, they were pulled back out, as it was believed that the gods did not want them, and their fate was unenviable. But sometimes the gods did not need blood. They required a victory, demonstrating the strength and will of the Mayan people. One of the most mysterious and interesting Mayan traditions was the ball game, known as pits, which was not merely a sporting amusement, but an entire ritual with deep symbolic meaning, in which destiny was decided. Players could not touch the ball with their hands or feet, but had to use only their shoulders, chest, elbows, and hips, which made the game very difficult and requiring a high level of skill. The goal was to get the heavy rubber ball through a stone ring set high on the wall of the court, which was an incredibly difficult task. The ball for the game weighed several pounds, representing a heavy rubber projectile, and the stone ring into which it had to be shot was at an imposing height, almost 10 feet above the ground, which required incredible strength, agility, and coordination from the players. Games could last for hours, or sometimes even days, until one of the teams finally scored the winning goal, determining the outcome of the match. This game was a symbolic struggle between the forces of light and darkness, between day and night, the sun and the moon, reflecting the dualistic worldview of the Maya. Some ball games were recreational in nature, representing a regular sporting competition. But if the game had a ritual significance, associated with religious holidays or important events, it could end in sacrifice, adding a tragic overtone to victory or defeat. To this day, there is no consensus among historians as to exactly who was sacrificed to the gods after a ritual ball game, the losers or the winners. Some historians and researchers believe that the sacrifice of the best player from the winning team was the greatest honor bestowed upon a person, as they became a messenger between people and the gods, going to the afterlife to convey their prayers and requests to them. Others believe that the losers were the victims, as they represented the forces of darkness, chaos, and destruction that must be destroyed to restore harmony in the world. Either way, the ball game for the Maya was not just a sporting competition, but an important ritual on whose outcome the fate of an entire city could depend. And when a great Mayan ruler died of natural causes, their funeral was held in a special way, representing a complex and solemn ceremony designed to properly send them off to the world of the gods and ensure their well-being in the afterlife. They were sent on their final journey to the world of the gods so that they could take their place among their ancestors. The ruler's body was carefully washed with incense, rubbed with oils, dressed in the finest clothes adorned with precious stones and covered with flowers, showing respect for their high status. Particular attention was paid to jade, which symbolized eternal life, immortality, and connection with the gods. The burial was also quite unusual and differed from the burial of ordinary people. The tombs of the rulers were hidden deep inside majestic pyramids, creating entire underground complexes consisting of passages, halls, and chambers filled with treasures and gifts necessary for the afterlife. Next to the body of the deceased ruler were placed numerous items that were to ensure their well-being in the afterlife. Jade masks, intricately made and decorated with precious stones, so that they could retain their face and identity after death. Clay vessels, filled with a variety of food and drinks, so that they would not experience hunger and thirst in the afterlife, and could enjoy all the benefits. Sacrificial servants and concubines, who were killed so that their souls would accompany them into eternity, carrying out all their orders and ensuring their comfort. It was believed that after death, the ruler became an intermediary between the world of people and the gods, gaining the opportunity to communicate with the gods, watch over their people living on earth, and help them from the heavens, protecting them from misfortunes and sending prosperity. Now, let's find out how the Maya saw the origin of the world and how they explained their appearance on earth. And for this, we will turn to one of the 4 surviving Mayan books, known as the Popol Vuh, containing myths and legends about the creation of the world. Once upon a time, in distant times, when the world had no form or order and the heavens and the earth were one dark ocean, the gods decided that it was time to put an end to chaos and give the world shape and structure. They divided the water, created mountains, rivers, and trees, filled the sky with the sun and the moon, illuminating the world. But that was not enough. Their world lacked those who could remember their names, glorify them, thank them for the created order, and make sacrifices to them. Thus was born the first attempt by the gods to create a person capable of honoring them. First, they fashioned people out of clay, but they turned out to be too weak, fragile, and incapable of life. They could not speak, move, get food for themselves, or hold weapons. Then the gods destroyed their failed creation and tried again, creating new people. Next were people made of wood. They were strong, could walk and work, getting food for themselves and building dwellings, but inside they remained empty and soulless, knowing neither fear, nor love, nor gratitude. They did not honor the gods, did not make sacrifices to them, and did not pray at the altars, showing disrespect to their creators. Then the angry gods, disappointed in their creation, sent disasters upon them to punish them for their ingratitude. Angry beasts tore them to pieces, their own dogs ate them, and their houses collapsed on their heads, destroying them. And only with the third attempt did the world find its true masters, capable of honoring and glorifying their creators. The gods created the first people from maize, sacred corn, which was the staple food for the Maya. Their bones were strong as corn stalks. Their blood flowed like its sap, filling them with life. They were strong, intelligent, possessed feelings and emotions, remembered their creators, honored them, made sacrifices to them, and kept the laws of the world. Thus began the history of humanity, according to the beliefs of the Maya. But not everything was calm and harmonious in this world created by the gods. Even in it, shadows continued to fight with light. Chaos tried to destroy order, and the forces of darkness opposed the forces of good. And one of the greatest and most epic battles in Mayan history was the battle that took place in the underworld, in the gloomy Xibalba, where a struggle for life and death unfolded. Among all the ancient myths and legends of the Mayan people, the most ancient, famous, and beloved is the tale of the hero twins, known as Hunahpu and Xbalanque, which tells of their exploits and victory over the forces of evil. Somewhere on Earth, in distant times, lived two brothers, Hunahpu and Hunahpu, famous and skilled ball players whose fame resounded throughout the land. They loved their game very much, and every day the blows of their balls shook the air, filling the land with a rhythmic and mesmerizing knock that spread far around. But their cheerful games reached the depths of gloomy Xibalba, where the sinister lords of death lived, who did not like to be disturbed and bothered. The gods of the underworld did not like it when their peace was disturbed by audacious mortals, and wishing to punish them for their disrespect, summoned the brothers to Xibalba to subject them to severe trials. The brothers, realizing that they could not disobey the will of the gods, could not refuse the challenge, and bravely set off on a dangerous journey. They descended into the gloomy world of shadows, but could not pass all the tests prepared for them by the lords of Xibalba. They were deceived, subjected to cruel tortures, and eventually killed, forever imprisoning their souls in the gloomy realm of the dead. But this tragic story did not end there. The soul of Hunahpu did not disappear without a trace, but gave new life. After a while, in the shadow of a great tree, his seed sprouted, and from it, twins were miraculously born. Hunahpu and Xbalanque, who inherited his strength and courage. From early childhood, they differed from ordinary children, showing extraordinary agility, sharp mind, cunning, strength, and courage. When the brothers grew up, fate led them to the ball game, inheriting from their father a love for this occupation, and the blows of their balls again disturbed the underworld, disrupting the peace of its inhabitants. The lords of Xibalba, angered by the disobedience of mortals, again summoned the brothers to their gloomy world, hoping that they would be able to deceive them as easily as they once deceived their father. But this time, everything was different. as the twins knew about their treachery. The twins knew who they were dealing with and were ready for any trials and traps. They did not bow to false rulers, did not believe flattering and cunning servants, and did not fall into any of the traps set for them, showing caution and wisdom. They were sent to deadly trials to test their strength and endurance, the hall of cold, where even souls freeze, the hall of fire, where the flame does not allow them to breathe, the hall of tigers, where bloodthirsty beasts await their prey. But they survived, passed through all the trials, without flinching before anything and without showing their fear. Then the lords of death, disappointed in their resilience and disobedience, decided to play with them in their own game, the ball game, hoping to win over them and humiliate them. This was not just entertainment, but a deadly duel in which their lives were at stake. They fought in pitch darkness, where the ball was the night itself, and the opponents were the sinister forces of darkness, seeking to destroy their souls. They fought bravely, showing incredible courage and skill, and they almost managed to win, but the gods of the underworld could not allow them to leave alive, understanding that this would undermine their power. Then the Death Lords lured them into a cunning trap, murdered them, and dismembered their bodies, scattering their bones along the river, hoping that this would be the end of their story. But the hero twins, possessing magical power, outwitted death itself, demonstrating their might. They transformed themselves into fish, and then into old men who could perform miracles and amaze people with their magic. They returned to Xibalba and began to showcase their magical abilities, resurrecting the dead and displaying their strength. The Death Lords, astounded by their power, wanted to witness this miracle firsthand, eager to test their abilities. They commanded the twins to kill them and then bring them back to life, to be certain of their power. But this was part of the twins' ingenious plan. When the Death Lords were killed, no one brought them back to life, leaving them lying dead, eradicating evil from Xibalba. Thus, the death gods were defeated by the hero twins, and the reign of darkness in the underworld was broken. Having conquered darkness and freed the souls of the dead, the twins did not return to earth, but chose to remain in the heavens. They ascended to the sky, and the gods transformed them into the sun and the moon, so that they would eternally illuminate the world and remind people of their great victory over death. Now, every day when the sun rises above the horizon, it reminds people of the great triumph of good over evil, achieved by the hero twins. They conquered death itself, and as long as their light shines in the heavens, people remember their story, passing it down from generation to generation. All these amazing stories are recorded in an ancient text that the Maya called the Popol Vuh, containing myths, legends, and tales of the creation of the world, gods, and heroes. This ancient text, known as the Popol Vuh, has survived fire, time, and destruction, bearing witness to the history and culture of the Mayan people. Attempts were made to destroy it, to burn it along with temples and other sacred books, to erase it from the face of the earth, forever depriving the Maya of their heritage. But the words survived, passed down orally from generation to generation, until they were finally written down again, preserving for us the voice of ancestors. It is not just a book, but a priceless treasure, containing the wisdom, knowledge, and beliefs of an ancient people, the voice of ancestors echoing through the centuries. This is a story that will never die. As long as the sun and moon continue their eternal journey across the sky, illuminating the world and reminding us of the grandeur of the Mayan civilization. Among the many mysteries and secrets associated with the ancient Mayan civilization, one in particular has stirred the minds of people for over a century, unsettling researchers and mystery enthusiasts alike. This is the legend of the 13 crystal skulls, which, according to tradition, hold ancient knowledge within them, possessing the power to change the fate of humanity and open new horizons for it. It is said that if all of them are gathered together in one place, they will reveal the secrets of the universe, warn of impending disasters that could destroy the world, or even provide the key to immortality, granting people eternal life. But where did this mysterious story originate, shrouded in secrecy and causing so much controversy? The legend of the crystal skulls is not recorded in any of the Mayan texts that have survived to this day, which raises doubts about its authenticity. It was passed down orally as part of ancient myths and legends, from mouth to mouth, accumulating more and more details over time, which stated that once, even before the appearance of humans, there existed a powerful and highly developed civilization on Earth, possessing the knowledge of the gods. This civilization, having reached unprecedented power, vanished without a trace, but left behind 13 mysterious artifacts containing all its secrets, which could help humanity reach new heights. These skulls were made from a single piece of quartz, distinguished by its purity and transparency, and possessed mystical properties. They could speak, transmit visions, heal diseases, and predict the future. But to activate their power and unlock their potential, they must be gathered together at a specific time and place, performing a complex ritual. It is said that this must happen when humanity is on the verge of self-destruction to save the world from ruin. However, for a long time this story remained only a beautiful myth without any confirmation. Everything changed in the early 20th century when the first of these mysterious artifacts was found in the jungles of Belize, marking the beginning of a new wave of interest in this legend. In the early 1920s, British traveller and researcher Frederick Mitchell Hedges set off on an expedition to the jungles of Central America to study the ruins of an ancient Mayan city known as Antun, hoping to find valuable artifacts there. One day, his daughter Anna, who accompanied him on the journey, explored the abandoned temples and accidentally stumbled upon a strange object, sparkling in the rays of the sun penetrating through the dense foliage. It was a skull, skillfully carved from a single piece of rock crystal, distinguished by its purity and transparency. Its surface was perfectly polished, and the lower jaw could move freely as if it were alive, creating a spooky effect. When the skull was raised to the light, it refracted the rays in such a way that bright and mysterious flashes ignited inside it like a burning fire, mesmerizing with its appearance. Anna assured her father and other members of the expedition that after some time after the find, she began to experience strange visions that she could not explain. She saw scenes from the distant past, heard voices uttering incomprehensible words, and felt the skull transmitting unknown knowledge to her, revealing the secrets of the universe. News of the find quickly spread around the world, sparking enormous interest and generating many rumors and speculations. The mysterious artifact attracted the attention of researchers, mystics, scientists, archaeologists, and simply curious people who wanted to touch the mystery. Many believed that this was the true heritage of the ancient gods, left by them for humanity to help it in a difficult moment. But it soon became clear that the skull found in Antun was not the only one of its kind, and that there were other similar artifacts. After the find in Antun, other crystal skulls began to appear, each with its own unique and attention-grabbing story. The British Museum, for example, houses another quartz skull acquired in the 19th century from private collectors who were fond of collecting antiquities. It is also carved with incredible precision and skill, and was considered a relic that belonged to Mayan priests who used it in their rituals. Another crystal skull ended up in Paris at the Musée de l'Homme, where it is on public display, arousing interest. It was smaller than other known crystal skulls, but its workmanship was striking in its skill, testifying to the highest level of technological development, and some even believed that it was created by a much more ancient and advanced civilization that existed long before the Maya. As the number of crystal skulls found grew, a complete legend began to form about the 13 artifacts scattered around the world, waiting for their hour. According to this legend, if all 13 skulls are gathered together, they will reveal the secrets of the universe, bestowing upon humanity knowledge that allows it to achieve unprecedented progress. Some believe that this was a gift from the gods sent down to humans. Others believe that they were left on Earth by aliens who visited our planet in ancient times. And still others claimed that the skulls possessed healing properties, capable of healing diseases and transmitting ancient wisdom stored in their crystals. Interestingly, in the early 20th century, the crystal skulls became of interest to the Ahnenerbe, an occult organization created in Nazi Germany, which was engaged in the search for ancient knowledge, occult artifacts, and research into ancient civilizations, hoping to find evidence of the superiority of the Aryan race. It was believed that the Maya, like other great cultures of antiquity, could possess secret knowledge and technologies, lost over time, capable of changing the course of history. There are various versions and assumptions that researchers from the Ahnenerbe tried to find crystal skulls, hoping that they contained ancient encrypted knowledge or possessed magical properties that could be used for military purposes. Some stories claim that some of the skulls did fall into their hands, but there is still no official confirmation of this fact. But not all researchers and scientists were sure of the authenticity of the crystal skulls, rightly believing that many of them were fakes, created at a later time. In the late 20th century, when technology reached a sufficient level to study artifacts at a microscopic level, scientists decided to test the crystal skulls to determine their age and origin. They found that there were no traces of the use of ancient tools on the surface of most skulls, which contradicted the theory of their creation by the Mayan civilization. If the skulls had indeed been created by the ancient Maya, characteristic scratches from obsidian knives or stone cutters used to process the stone should have remained on their surface. However, instead, they discovered traces of mechanical processing, characteristic of metal tools that appeared much later. The British Museum conducted thorough research and concluded that their crystal skull was created in France in the 19th century, during a time when collectors were actively buying up antiques and various fakes. Later, many scientists stated that most of the known crystal skulls are cleverly made fakes, created in Europe in the 19th century for sale to tourists and collectors. Despite the conclusions of scientists who exposed many crystal skulls as fakes, the legend of the 13 artifacts has not disappeared and continues to live on in people's imaginations. Some argue that the fakes were created in the image of real, ancient skulls, which are hidden somewhere from prying eyes, waiting for their hour. Others believe that some of the skulls may have indeed belonged to the Mayan civilization, but their originals have either long disappeared or are still kept in private collections, inaccessible for research. Until the end of her life, Anna Mitchell Hedges insisted that the crystal skull found by her father in Lubantun was a genuine artifact created by the ancient Maya, and that it possessed unusual properties that she personally experienced. The Maya left the world with many mysteries, and not all the secrets of their civilization have been revealed to this day. But among all their legends, one of the most majestic and mysterious is the story of Kukulkan, the great feathered serpent who brought knowledge, laws, and order to the people, making them civilized. According to ancient Mayan myths, Kukulkan came to them from afar, arriving from distant lands. He was unlike other gods known to the Maya and was distinguished by his wise and just rule. In descriptions of Kukulkan, he is often depicted as a giant serpent covered in bright feathers, symbolizing his connection to the sky. His body writhes in the heavens like a snake, and he flies like a bird, combining the wisdom of a serpent who knows all the secrets of the earth and the freedom of a bird soaring in the heavens. Kukulkan not only brought the Maya laws and knowledge, but also taught them how to build cities, plan fields for growing crops, understand the cycles of the stars, and predict the future. It is said that he gave people the knowledge of the great calendar, allowing them to accurately predict the changing of the seasons, solar and lunar eclipses, and the movement of the planets across the sky, demonstrating a high level of astronomical development among the ancient Maya. But his role was not limited to peaceful instructions, the transmission of knowledge, and the establishment of laws. When the world plunged into chaos, when wars threatened to destroy Mayan cities and lead to the demise of civilization, he returned to restore order, punishing the guilty and establishing justice. Legends say that Kukulkan did not die, but went beyond the sea, promising to return to his people one day when the time came. Some versions of the legend claim that he went east, towards the rising sun, to gather strength and knowledge, and then return. Others say that he ascended into the sky, turning into one of the stars, to watch over his people and help them from there. But the most interesting thing about this story is that similar legends about the feathered serpent existed not only among the Maya, but also among other civilizations of Mesoamerica. If you look closely at the myths and legends of other Mesoamerican civilizations, you can see that the Aztecs, for example, had a god with very similar traits, named Quetzalcoatl. Like Kukulkan, he was a feathered serpent, a wise and just teacher who brought knowledge and civilization to the people. The Aztecs said that Quetzalcoatl also left one day, but promised to return to help his people. One of the most controversial and debated hypotheses associated with Kukulkan and Quetzalcoatl is the idea that they were white-skinned men with beards who came from outside and brought civilization and knowledge to the peoples of Mesoamerica. This myth became especially widespread after the Spanish conquest, when European chroniclers began to interpret the stories of Kukulkan in their favor, adapting them to their own ideas about the world. According to this version, the Maya and Aztecs were waiting for the return of Kukulkan, which supposedly allowed Hernán Cortés to enter the city without a fight and seize power. However, modern historians believe that this idea emerged after the Spanish invasion and was convenient for the Spanish, as it justified their power in the eyes of the locals, presenting them as liberators rather than conquerors. There is no archaeological or anthropological evidence that the Maya or Aztecs had any contact with white-skinned peoples before the arrival of the Spanish, and this hypothesis has no basis. In the early 20th century, the German organization Ahnenerbe, known for its occult interests, was actively searching for traces of ancient, highly developed civilizations that could have passed on their knowledge to the peoples of the Americas, in particular the Maya and Aztecs. There is a theory that researchers from Ahnenerbe carefully studied the myths of Kukulkan and Quetzalcoatl, hoping to find evidence of the existence of an ancient race of sages or a lost civilization that could have passed on advanced knowledge to the peoples of Mesoamerica. However, there is no official confirmation that Ahnenerbe actually managed to find any artifacts or evidence confirming contact between the Maya or Aztecs and other cultures before the arrival of the Spanish, and these searches were unsuccessful. Today, most scientists attribute all these theories to the realm of pseudoscience, which has nothing to do with reality. And since we are talking about the mysteries of the Maya, we cannot fail to mention the prediction that became a real sensation in the modern world, frightening many people. For several years before December 21st, 2012, people around the world anxiously and fearfully awaited the end of the world, which the Mayan calendar indicated. Some were preparing for natural disasters, hurricanes, earthquakes, and floods. Others were building shelters, hoping to survive the apocalypse. Some believed that they would experience divine ascension to paradise, and some awaited a collision with the mysterious planet Nibiru, predicted by the ancient Sumerians. Everyone was talking about the same thing. The Maya predicted the end of times, and the world would soon come to an end. But when the long-awaited morning of December 22nd arrived, the sun calmly rose above the horizon, the world remained in place, and the predicted end of the world did not happen, and the myth of the Mayan prediction collapsed like a house of cards. But where did this idea of the end of the world predicted by the ancient Maya come from, and why did it cause such a stir in the modern world? Did the ancient Maya really believe that their complex calendar would one day lead to the demise of all humanity, or was it just a modern interpretation of their ideas about time, distorted by time and the imagination of people who misunderstood their culture? To understand this, it is necessary to understand how the ancient Mayan civilization perceived time and what importance it attached to its calendars. For us, modern people, it is customary to think of time as a straight line moving from the past to the future. The past remains behind, the present moves forward, and the future is an unexplored area that will one day become a reality and into which we gradually move. But the Maya thought completely differently, perceiving time cyclically. In their view, time moved in a circle, repeating itself over and over. As day turns into night and winter turns into spring, so epochs replaced each other, returning to the starting point and beginning a new cycle. For them, there was no end point, and any completed cycle only meant the beginning of a new stage in history. One of the most complex and accurate tools that the Maya created was the long count calendar, demonstrating their deep knowledge of astronomy and mathematics. It allowed them not only to track days and years, as modern calendars do, but also to define huge time cycles covering millennia and even millions of years. The basis of this system was baktuns, time intervals approximately 394 years long each. The Maya believed that 13 baktuns made up one great cycle, equal to about 5,125 years, and that the completion of this cycle was an important event marking the transition to a new stage. And this great Mayan cycle ended on December 21st, 2012, which served as a reason for numerous speculations about the end of the world. But if you look closely at the ancient Mayan inscriptions, nowhere does it say that the end of the world will come after that day and that humanity will be destroyed. It was simply the end of one time cycle and the beginning of a new stage of development, which was supposed to bring change. It all started with a single inscription discovered in the ruins of the ancient city of Tortuguero, located in modern-day Mexico. This stone monument, created over 1,300 years ago, contained a mention of the completion of the 13th baktun, approaching on December 21st, 2012. The text stated that, at this important moment in time, the god Bolon Yokte, a mysterious and powerful deity associated with change, chaos, and rebirth, would descend, heralding the onset of a new era. But further in the inscription, the text is damaged, and some of the symbols are missing, making it impossible to fully understand the meaning of the message of the ancient Maya. The lost symbols left a huge space for speculation and various interpretations, and this is where the speculation about the end of the world began. Some archaeologists and historians have suggested that the inscription could refer to significant changes in the Mayan world, possibly political upheavals, changes of dynasties, or natural disasters that they had already observed in their history and that were to occur in the future. But in the 20th century, this text began to be twisted and romanticized, attributing to it a meaning that it did not have. Books, articles, and various publications featured theories that the Maya knew something we do not and predicted the coming apocalypse. Some claimed that they predicted giant solar storms capable of destroying the Earth. Some spoke of the approach of a huge asteroid that would collide with our planet. And some even linked this date to extraterrestrial civilizations that were to visit Earth. Hollywood quickly picked up on this idea, and in the 2000s, numerous films and television shows created the image of an ancient prophecy that supposedly predicted disaster for all of humanity, scaring people and causing panic. As the winter of 2012 drew closer, the panic among the population grew stronger. People were preparing for the end of the world, buying up food and necessities, building shelters. Some were selling their property, and various sects promised salvation to those who would be ready to meet this day correctly, bringing them their savings. History knows many examples of when humanity has awaited imminent death, succumbing to panic and superstition. In the year 1000, many in Europe were sure that the world was about to end, and people prepared to meet Judgment Day, giving away their property and performing penance. In the 20th century, fears of nuclear war, global warming, ecological disasters, and other threats gave rise to numerous bleak scenarios of the future, painting apocalyptic pictures of the collapse of civilization. Humans, by their very nature, are drawn to prophecies of the end of the world because they create a sense of importance in what is happening and give special meaning to their lives. We want to believe that we are living in an extraordinary time, that our age is the last, and that we will be the ones to witness the finale of the great story of humanity, becoming witnesses to something grand. But if the Maya teach us anything, it is that there is no such thing as an end, and that every ending is followed by a new beginning. Time moves in circles, eras replace one another, and every conclusion is merely the start of a new journey, full of opportunities and hopes. The history of the Mayan civilization, full of mysteries and secrets, is a prime example of this, demonstrating to us that life goes on, despite all the hardships and trials.